Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the TAP podcast. And there's so much happening right now.
Okay, stop. You're the host. Like, share, subscribe, comment, TAW, explosions.
This was this was Skyler's idea. Blame him.
Whatever. Since this was my idea to gather you two together, may I be the one to take the lead?
Sure. Here's the wheel, and be sure to avoid the trees because there are more just appearing over the horizon.
Thank you. Well, yeah, this is Skyler and Sean and Joshua. How y'all doing?
Well, Sean said that he wanted to get high before he could come up with more jokes, so I'm waiting on the sounds of weed inhalation.
Well, I have been trying to be on my best behavior here while we do the introductions, and we all started screaming at each other trying to introduce the show. And so now that we've all introduced the whole show, Skyler, what are we doing here? Good thing. Sorry, I just got an IKEA package.
Sounds like you're in the middle of IKEA right now.
Yeah, and while it does actually. And while he's so okay, now that I got the stuff in, the reason why we gathered here today is because we are upset at a certain company, and we've been meaning to do this for a couple months, but like, we did not have the energy to do this, to be honest. I'm still debating whether I do. But but you compiled us together and you said, "Come on, lads, it's time to yell."
Yeah.
So here we are, ready to yell.
Why
don't you lay the groundwork? And honestly, I'm interested to know what the straw is that broke the camel's back for you, Sky, that we had to come congregate here to come issue and register our consternation. Well, here's the thing: the straw that broke the camel's back happened for me a while ago. I have not liked AEW. In case you're wondering what we were angry about, it's all Elite Wrestling.
Yeah. Real quick, I know that there are people that are subscribed to my channel and watch my content for some ungodly reason that are fans of AEW. If you are a fan of AEW, this is not the podcast for you. Just forewarning.
Cover your ears, or get your mom to.
Yeah, cover your virgin ears because here comes some disagreeing opinions.
And this is the thing at the end of the day when it comes down to this. AEW upset us when they fired a certain Phil Brooks. And to be honest, I'm not even a CM Punk person, but just the way that things have been handled. But to be honest, the way I wanted to break this down is that I want to talk about all the things that have upset us from the beginning with this company, because really it's been an ongoing thing. It's just the CM Punk thing broke our backs, and then we haven't recorded anything AEW related except for veiled pot shots here and there because we were not in the mood to talk about this company.
I wouldn't say so much veiled. Just every once in a while we were like, fuck those guys.
Yeah,
although
we were pretty overt in it, but we never really overtly addressed
why
the elephant in the we never really quite got through like, okay, they've stopped giving a shit about AEW, but what led to this? I mean, most people who've been following AEW, I think, understand without us having to say it. Whether they agree with it or not is one thing, but they understand. But it's still, I think you're right, Skyler, that it's worth providing a little deeper context here as we start watching them crumble to the ground. In a way, this is the thing, is that what's really kind of elevated this is just the lackluster sales and the lackluster business that they're doing. But I want to explore this from the beginning of AEW. And the reason why I want to explore this from the beginning is because I wanted to see where was the cracks? Have they always been there? And when did everything start falling apart? Just like this podcast. Well, right from the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah. And real quick, Skyler, you mentioned like we all had our breaking point with AEW. Would I be correct in saying your breaking point was somewhere in the last third of 2019? Also known as around the time when the company started.
yes and no, and that's kind of why I want to explore this, because I want to like identify at what point I chose not to give a shit anymore. But let's go ahead and get into it. So we're gonna start actually before AEW's beginning, because we were all aware of All Out and the thing that happened in Chicago. I think 2017, 2018, when Dave Meltzer said that Cody Rhodes and the Young Bucks could not sell out a building of 10,000 people, and they said, "Watch us."
And then they did for All In.
Yeah.
Right, which was a glorified indie show. I mean, Sean, you've seen that show. It's the indies at its best and worst in the mid-teens.
Dick Druids. That is all I have to say.
Remember, Joey Ryan was supposed to be a part of AEW.
And you know who he faced in that quote-unquote Dick Druid debauchery?
Adam Hangman Page.
Adam Hangman Page.
The warning signs were there from the very beginning.
It was staring us in the face from the beginning.
Yeah.
But to be fair, there were some very good matches on that card.
True.
The Aldis and Cody Rhodes match was very good. The what's his name? Green Arrow versus Christopher Daniels was also very good. What's his name? What's his real name? Stephen Amell.
Yeah, Stephen Amell.
Yep. That was good. Even Omega and Pentagon, when Pentagon actually meant something, had some levity to it. It wasn't the greatest match in the world, but it was still there. I mean, and then the Chris Jericho thing that happened. Again, when Jericho actually felt important and, didn't inflate to the size of the Goodyear blimp.
God, that feels like a lifetime ago, back when we all didn't hate Chris Jericho.
Yeah, well, here's the thing, is that, and I'll try to take the reins from this, I think part of the thing is that all of us were upset at WWE at the time because we were tired of the booking that Vince McMahon was doing. I think this was around the time of the Seth Rollins, Bray Wyatt, Hell in a Cell thing.
Yeah, that was the moment I gave up on WWE.
Did you know? Yeah, Seth Rollins was defending the Universal title against Baron Corbin. And did you know that he and Becky Lynch are dating? I almost said, did you know he and Baron Corbin are dating?
That would have been a twist.
I'll tell you something. If they had changed that story to that and taken that bold of a move, I would have at least seen it through.
The 20 teens version of Billy and Chuck. Who would have been Rico in that situation? Lacey. Yeah. Probably.
Somehow shoehorned into that whole deal, and I still don't quite understand why.
God, Lacey Evans with.
A woman to wrestle against Becky Lynch.
Imagine Lacey Evans with huge sideburns.
And that. Oh, jeez.
I'm very sure if you ask her with enough money, she'll do that on her OnlyFans.
Yeah.
But anyways, again, we're getting off topic, although for a good reason. So, again, we were all frustrated with WWE at the time. We all hated WWE programming under Vince. And it was looked at All Out as kind of like what wrestling could be outside of WWE, which was still not great, but at least it was different.
It was something.
Yeah.
It was something else.
It was something other than a disqualification inside a Hell in a Cell.
Well,
yeah.
It's just to kind of piggyback both of those points, it was also at a time when interest in other companies and other than WWE couldn't have been lower. I mean, Impact had shat the bed. That horse had completely left the barn. And Ring of Honor was really on the decline. They weren't really getting anywhere. Getting all their talent gutted constantly. And there just isn't enough of an American audience for it. But there was enough of people wanting something else to make the magic of what All In was actually still, probably to this day, feel like a pretty major show and a pretty landmark thing that happened in the world of professional wrestling, promotion-wise.
Which is pretty much what led to the creation of AEW, but the biggest thing was that was kind of like an audition of like what AEW was, until this man with bug eyes and glasses, Tony Khan, came in and said he wanted to do this business, and he wanted to work with these guys.
Little did we know what we were in for with Captain Cocaine over here.
Tremendous analysis of talent.
But the thing was that we were looking for something, and the idea of a sports-based presentation excited us. It was going to be on the Turner Network broadcast system, which was where WCW used to be, and they used to focus on wrestling more as a sport. They had talent coming in. Like, it wasn't like the roster. Well, here's the thing. The opening AEW roster was actually very bad.
Yes.
Yeah.
We were trying to find diamonds in the rough for a sizable amount of time in the earlier days of this company's existence.
Yeah, it was a couple diamonds here and there in an overwhelming tsunami of rough.
And Dallas Page.
Right, but I mean, you had guys like Cody Rhodes, and we knew Kenny Omega and the Bucks were going to be there. It was whatever. But that was back before, like, we all really, truly hated Kenny Omega and the Bucks. Although, I don't think there's a definite difference between 1, 2, and 3 in those standings.
Yeah.
Yeah, the thing is, while I'm not saying that Kenny Omega isn't to some degree responsible based on just his philosophy about wrestling for why AEW had the philosophy about wrestling that it did, to be fair, he's probably the one guy who had actual legitimate star power doing that style. And as much as WWE or AEW tried to capitalize on that, it never really materialized proactively as far as what people were looking for. But when all the drama started, he's one of those guys I really felt bad for.
Me too.
Because I don't think that he wanted any. He's like Rex from Toy Story. I don't like confrontations.
Yeah, I felt bad for him too, because he just wanted to do business, and all of this stuff was detracting from business, and he didn't want any part of it. But he was part of the group that was the main cause of it.
Well, let's go back again, because we're going back to like the genesis of AEW and the idea that there was talent on this roster, because there was. There were the 4 pillars who all were young guys, unproven guys, but they had potential. Samuel Guevara, Jungle Boy, there was Darby Allin, and MJF. All guys who were young and had potential. There was Chris Jericho, who was coming off of WWE TV before he went off the ship. There were wrestlers like
before he became the Kraken that destroyed the ship in Dead Man's Chest.
Right. There was SCU, which was a group of stable veterans to be there. Frankie Kazarian,
Daniels and Scorpio.
Daniels, and Scorpio Sky. And there was Brian Cage. Taz was there. All these guys were there. Jake Roberts, Lance Archer. All these guys who were on the indies and who were stars somewhat that were promoting stuff. And it was all the promises at the beginning. The promise of a sports-based presentation. The promise of healthcare for all wrestlers and equal pay for everybody and higher pay for everybody.
Well, the thing is that we were sold on the bill of goods that it was sports-based presentation. But here's where I knew things were not gonna. I was worried because if you recall, Chris Jericho at the very beginning when he was like announced to join AEW. He said, this is like Hulk Hogan coming to WCW in 1994. Little did we know how correct that statement would be. All things considered.
It's just so crazy because the first, half year of AEW while he was world champion, he was arguably the best part of the show. But the second he lost the AEW title and the pandemic hit, he very rapidly and still to this day became one of the absolute most biggest turnoffs to the show.
Yeah, and that's part of the thing. And that's part of the thing, though, is that there was potential in early AEW that we all liked. We all agreed that Cody Rhodes Dustin Rhodes match, for all the theatrics that the Rhodes brothers do, is still one of the best AEW matches of all time.
Agreed.
Might go down as the best in my book when the book is finally shut on AEW, which it will be, folks. You think it won't be, it will be.
Right. Chris Jericho's reign as Le Champion was actually compelling television because he was able to start doing things that were kind of fun and interesting, which he wasn't allowed to do in WWE. There was the whole feud with him and Cody, and then spun off the Cody and MJF stuff. When Dean Ambrose came in as Jon Moxley, we thought, wow, this is a big time get for AEW. One of the big stars of WWE television over the past few years, coming in, yes, with a different name, but going back to his roots, and he was the champion afterwards as it made sense. You would have one of the biggest stars in your company take over and be the world champion to lead while the young guys developed.
Well, this kind of goes back to Tony's eye for talent. Because little did we know that when you give wrestlers no restrictions, you start to understand why you have to give wrestlers restrictions.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is a philosophical difference that Tony wanted to instill from the start, not knowing just how much that was going to cause the damage that would eventually ensue.
That was a double-sided sword, a double-edged sword, where the part that's stabbing you is longer than the other part. Like,
but you don't know it because they're your friends and they're hugging you while the blade is going into your chest cavity.
Yeah. And you're like, why does my chest hurt? Oh, it's nothing. Everything is fine. Everything is fine, and this show is great.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, though, is that, like, a lot of this momentum got stopped when COVID happened, which was going to happen to anybody, and, like, it was a difficult and tense time.
Yeah.
True. Well, but before we get to that, Sky, I want to make another point about what we've talked about with this momentum, because, yes, they did have good pieces of matches. Jericho and Cody was actually quite good, although, in hindsight, he probably shouldn't have then said, I'm never going to compete for the world title again.
Well, the whole fear was that this was a wrestler who was going to, he's in charge, which means he's going to book himself to win the title.
Right. And I understand that, and I did understand that, but then once it was pretty much understood that no, he didn't really have the power that was alleged, I feel like they really could have done a runaround there. But the point I'm trying to make here is that for every one of those, there was the Stadium Stampede with the frozen plastic pigs in the freezer of the stadium. You know, there was always garbage. There was Michael Nakazawa versus Alex Bailey with Legos and an inflatable flamingo and taking the panties out of the jock strap and shoving them in the mouth. Joey Janela doing a moonsault onto no one. Like, for every speck of good, there was so much equal offense that it was really hard to get a good gauge of what this company's identity was.
Sunny Kiss exists on planet Earth. My God.
Joey Janela and Sonny Kiss were a tag team.
I remember that.
Joey Ryan should have also been a part of that tag team. Make it a trio.
For Christ's sakes. You know, there was an equal amount of suck that went with the good. And that was always a problem. That was always a problem with AEW, but because they were young, we wanted to give them benefit of the doubt, and it looked like they were heading in the right direction, and then the pandemic happened.
Yeah.
True. Now, there is one thing I do want to note, kind of like, that you did kind of bring up. So your first concern was when they did Stadium Stampede. That was kind of like the first warning sign for you, Sean, right?
Well, I mean, there was also Orange Cassidy doing the play kicks in the Battle Royal at Double or Nothing. That was a pretty good sign of things to come. Little did we know how much that whole can of worms was going to open up. But all the signs were there. It's just that I was willing to neglect a few of them for the sake of the better parts of the show, with the idea that maybe the rest of it might polish up with experience.
That's fair. Now, for you, Joshua, what was the first moment that you realized, wait a minute, this doesn't look or smell good?
Well, I was the most generous to AEW of the three of us because I was like, yay, not WWE, because WWE had pissed me off so many times. But honestly, the pandemic, I'm not gonna blame them for much, because when the pandemic happened, I kind of stopped watching wrestling for a while because it was very hard to.
It was very hard to.
Yeah.
The Thunderdome really didn't cut it.
Yeah. And when things came back, and I remember in 2021, AEW was firing on all cylinders, although in retrospect, it was just because they were hiring big names and they had the second coming of CM Punk, which they lucked into and then completely fucked up. But we'll get to that. Yeah. But for me, the first real big was honestly much later at Revolution 2022. You know, when we had the Battle of the Atoms. Yeah, that was when I was like, oh dear. I sensed trouble, and the snowball just started it became an avalanche of dog shit, and now we're here today where we are.
Okay, so those are pretty genuine, like, places where, like, oh no, what have I done? For me, it has to be when Sammy Guevara wrestled against Matt Hardy in that Falls Count Anywhere match, and Matt Hardy and him did a spot where they were going off of like this construction apparatus. Oh, I think it's like a lifter, whatever you call it. Yeah, and they were like a scaffold lifter, and they were 10 or 15 feet in the air with two tables set up, and they both missed the table, and Matt Hardy's head went and hit the concrete, and they stopped the match because he had a concussion, which was good. And then they restarted the match and went right to a finish. With concussed Matt Hardy climbing another 10 or 15 feet on the stage setup, on the stage beams, just so he could push Sammy Guevara off into a crash pad, which was barely obvious.
Yeah, and that's part of that amateur hour type of deal that we were kind of, we were alluding to. And the thing was, this was during the health insurance era, and we're taking care of our wrestlers. But what happened? It was either right before that or right after that, where Sammy Guevara just hocked a chair at Matt's head and split him 6 ways from Sunday.
You can look even further back than that when Cody Rhodes let Sean Spears almost decapitate him with a chair.
Yeah, well, at least the credit of that was at least for heat.
Yeah.
Right, that was at least for, it's not good, but it was at least for heat. There was at least a purpose to that, where there really wasn't a purpose to what. And honestly, I think Matt Hardy coming and doing the teleportation and changing clothes in the ice machine, that didn't help.
Yeah.
Especially for sports-based presentation, and then they're doing WWE-style hokey stuff, but on way less of a budget.
Yeah.
And way less successfully. And that's really what held AEW down for a long time. Still does. Now it's their main programming, but it's...
Yeah.
There was at least some semblance of wrestling and all of the stuff mixed in, because their whole idea was variety show. And I was willing to accept that, so long as there was some good wrestling on the program. And then the pandemic happened, and none of us paid any attention to it until...
Well, here's the thing, though, I do want to note, because around the pandemic time was around the time that a very important development happened for me specifically. I started listening to Jim Cornette. And the reason why I want to note this is that Jim Cornette famously is one of the greatest, if not polarizing, wrestling minds that's still around. And as the most open and frequent critic of AEW, he was the one that kind of opened my eyes to things that what they're doing does not make sense. When him and Brian Last started reviewing these shows.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing.
Again, not to give credit to Jim Cornette, enjoy the free plug though, but it just kind of
Good point, Skyler, because really, AEW was crucial for the success and the expansion of just how huge Jim Cornette's podcast is now. It was big before, right? He had gained a lot of fans, but really, AEW's ratings, especially at the beginning, had a lot for Jim Cornette to thank. Because the 2 weeks that Jim said, fuck it, I'm not doing anymore, they lost, 200,000 people? In the ratings, yeah, it was ridiculous. The AEW, even though Jim was sitting there shitting on it, AEW benefited a lot from Jim's interest in it, and actually, Jim benefited a lot from talking about it.
Hey, hate watching is a very real thing.
And it became, almost like Jim Cornette ended up being a third brand promotion to the point where he's, I think, drawing better numbers than AEW is now. But it's
crazy to consider also when you look at like the history of AEW's viewership and you look at how the viewership has changed over the years. When they started, they had a solid million to 1.25 million that they could reliably get to watch their show.
But then the novelty wore off.
As a 1.4.
Yeah, that was, and it has never matched that.
Nope.
Not once. And you know what's funny? I remember at the time everyone saying they're never gonna match that. I remember people saying that they will never match that, and I thought, well, there's a chance. I mean, if they improve. No, they were right.
Yeah.
They've gotten close a couple times. They've gotten like a 1.1 million, but they have never gotten up to 1.4. And
right, they've done 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. It's just they got to the point where the ratings started to collapse as things were happening around them. Now, I want to chronicle something with you just so I can get your guys' viewpoint on this one, all right? So Chris Jericho was the first champion. He won his title August 31st, 2019.
yeah.
And he defended the title for 182 days. And again, this was the early AEW. Jon Moxley was the world champion afterwards. He had the title for 277 days. He had it for most of the pandemic from February until December, until he lost it to Kenny Omega. And then Kenny Omega held the belt for 346 days until he lost the belt to Adam Page. And here's the thing. Do you want to know why I note this?
Please.
This was Tony Khan's plan, was to have Jericho be the first champion, Moxley be the second champion, Omega get the belt, and then give it to Page. Because the hope was by then, Page would be the new, fresh, somewhat younger guy who could be the face of the company. At least that was their plan originally.
Yeah.
But part of the problem with that too, and this is really another, I guess, sign of concern, is that when that happened, Adam Page was not very hot as a wrestler at that point. And the person who had just come in was Bryan Danielson, who had just had an hour-long clinic. And he was white hot, and he was coming off of WWE, and this is when Tony started getting major names. And so everybody started getting more invested. That hour-long Broadway that Danielson had. And it was at a time when everyone was still hyped for Danielson before he outed himself, like everyone else has in AEW.
It's just one of those things where, like, Adam Page was the guy who was supposed to be the badass champion that would take over from Kenny Omega, friends against each other thing. And his first title victory after he won the title from Omega had the Dark Order come in and celebrate with him.
I was just about to say.
Sad drunk for 6 months previously.
I was just about to say. I'll never forget like how much the crowd popped for when he finally beat Kenny Omega after having a great match with him, and then the reaction tapered off as the Dark Order came out, and you're just like, you had something and then you immediately ruined it. And
well, let's pause for a second and let's talk about the Dark Order.
Must we?
Yes, we do, because this is another critical part of the AEW story. Because this was a Young Bucks invention. And they said, we're going to do this, we're going to run it into the ground, even though we got a fat turd-like schlub air punching the mat like he's not... I will never unsee that video of that dude literally just punching the air. But this is the thing. That's the reputation they started getting. Not, hey, we're getting all these big names and we're actually signing people and we're making some strides, but for every one of those that they had the Dark Order.
This is in my opinion, this is one of AEW's biggest problems. When there's something that they like that's clearly not working, they refuse to kill it because they like it. The Dark Order is still a thing today. How and why? Because they like it and they don't want to kill it because they like it, even though no one gives a shit about it. And no one has ever given a shit about it over the entire existence of it.
Well, except for the brief span of time when Brody Lee died.
Yeah, but that's not even because
Something that we're critical of, like we all felt really terrible about Brody Lee dying when he did because it was just so sudden, and we never wanted to criticize him because when he was Luke Harper back in WWE, we all loved him.
Yeah.
It's just an unfortunate situation. But again, having said that, that was the perfect time to just end the stable because the stable was supposed to be around Brody Lee. And obviously they kept it around for 3 more years afterwards.
Yeah.
Well, it was just and another big problem with that. It's like, we were all sad about Brody Lee, but at the same time, it's not like he was putting in quality work. And that's
Possibly due to his health illness. Possibly due to the health illness.
It could be due to his health issues, but it's also because he had crap material to work with. You know, it's like this is part of the problem. It's that we did not know just how cancerous Tony Khan's booking was until we started doing 5 different shows of it. But at the beginning, you know, we didn't know what the balance was, right? Between what was Tony's involvement and what was the talent's involvement. And, you know, but the Dark Order, I mean, it had Colt Cabana in it at one point.
What a can of worms that opened.
Yeah, and that was its own different deal. But it's Tony's absolute refusal to admit anything's wrong, even though he has empirical evidence otherwise.
Like, say what you want about WWE, even at their worst, at least they're willing to kill something.
Yeah, almost too quickly sometimes.
Yeah.
Like there was potential in Baron Corbin and JBL until that one day that JBL's like, yeah, you're a pimple on the ass of life and your mama should have just aborted you or whatever he said. But he basically just said that, like, where he just was like, you're a disgrace to the name of professional wrestler and you're not going to get my name. You're not taking my name with your bald bitch ass. And he just walked out. But, like, there was at least an acknowledgement there of, like, okay, this isn't working. You know, maybe there was something here, but, like, we'll just try it differently.
Well, that thing with JBL and Corbin have been going on for, like, 6 months, and after 6 months, it was clear it was not going to work.
Well, I mean, in defense of that one actually wasn't working, but, like, to the point is sometimes they're a little too trigger-happy on killing gimmicks, even though there might be some speck of potential in the outset.
Whereas Tony Khan just outright refuses to, because if he had to kill a gimmick, that would imply that it didn't work. And that would also imply that Tony Khan did something that didn't work. And Tony Khan never does anything wrong. Because
the thing is that there's a lot of things that are there. Potential. I feel like potential is a lot of what you could say about AEW. The potential was there to make money with a lot of these things. They had the perfect tag team feud of the Young Bucks and FTR. Even though you and me, Sean, Joshua, are not big fans of the Young Bucks and their work, there was legitimately interest there in that feud and program. And they never did it right.
Well, because, and this is where, and now we have to address the other elephant in this AEW room. The EVPs.
You should, again, this whole thing, the day that AEW closes its doors, they need to use that as an example of, if you are a wrestler, you are also not going... You are either a wrestler or you have some kind of authority. You cannot do both.
Yeah, not everyone is Jeff Jarrett. Okay, bad example.
I was about to say, are you talking about the multi-time NWA World Champion who was in charge of, like, the title of TNA?
Oh yeah, Skyler, you just made a really good joke of which Jeff Jarrett, and that's a tremendous point. Because Jeff Jarrett in WCW was a problem. Jeff Jarrett in early TNA, even though he got TNA on the map, There were people throwing trash in the ring when he beat Monty Brown because he kept booking himself as champion so long. Jeff Jarrett in 2009 fucked Kurt Angle's wife and had to get fired for it.
And now that's her gimmick.
Global Force Wrestling, which was a cash for gold scam, merged with TNA and didn't succeed. And then Jeff Jarrett in AEW is hanging around with a 7-foot Indian guy on a farm. Jeff Hardy and dressing like he's goddamn Alexander Jodorowsky or Clint Eastwood in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Man, Karen Jarrett decides to fuck one wrestler that she's not married to, and now her gimmick for the rest of her life is I'm an unbearable bitch.
Well, truthfully, she's the one who slapped nuts, am I right?
Yeah.
Oh.
She busted a couple guitars back in her day, let me tell you what.
But here's the thing, despite all of that...
Oh, wait, I got one more. She's very proficient in the stroke. Continue.
There you go.
Boo. But having said all of that, if any of the EVPs had half the talent of Jeff Jarrett, then there wouldn't be a problem.
Well, but here's... This is a genuine question for the two of you because I really don't know the answer. Is it the EVP's fault for using the position of power they were given to manipulate and get what they want by being friends with the promoter? Or is it the promoter's fault for making inexperienced guys EVPs who didn't know how to properly do it, and therefore they were inherently going to take advantage of their situation because they were just the boys?
I would say both, and a third thing. Not only are they to blame for abusing their position of power, and not only is Tony Khan to blame for being stupid enough to do it in the first place, he's also to blame for being an absolute doormat and refusing to tell anyone no.
Well, you have to remember, there were not just 3 EVPs at the time, there were 4. There was the Bucks, Omega, and Cody Rhodes. And yes, Cody Rhodes booking himself out of the world title picture was a little bit on the nose, but there was a reason for that. It was to make sure that fans wouldn't just accuse him of being a person who puts himself over. Granted, he put himself over in the TNT title scene, which is a whole other thing we will discuss in a second.
Yeah, remember when Cody was the most hated man on planet Earth for for almost like half a year?
Well, listen, I don't want to give birth to this idea and then feed a placenta to the notion.
I knew that was coming.
But there was a lot of things about Cody and Brandy that weren't just Brandy specific that made both of them very insufferable. From the Snoop Dogg America's Got Talent knockoff to the reality show that no one was interested in, to AEW heels, as in high heels, for Brandy's cooking show. It's like it was.
And also stuff like, oh, baby faces and heels are just tired old tropes.
Yeah, Cody outed himself to be kind of stupid.
Yeah.
And there's a reason, I think, why he's worked so well in WWE, because the screen, in a similar way to Dusty, he needed the screen. He needed somebody to just keep him in check and tell it to him like it is occasionally. And that's where WWE really succeeds, for good or bad sometimes. But that's WWE still. But Cody and Brandy, there was a time, and I think that a big reason why he and the other EVPs ended up having a falling out is that Cody was somebody who was going to say, yeah, I don't know if I like that. He may not necessarily say no, but I bet you that there were some things that Cody was like, really? Really? This is the direction we're going to take this? And then, meanwhile, Chris Jericho is going to make Orange Cassidy a star, even though we have seen the same match from Orange Cassidy from the day he started. Talk about not wanting to admit a gimmick doesn't work.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is that Tony Khan's in love with that particular gimmick and the person behind that gimmick so much that he made that person a producer.
Really?
And again,
Yeah, he's a producer and a road agent. He tells people how to do matches.
Yeah.
Jesus
All those
Christ.
years in Chikara finally paid off.
I didn't know that, and now I hate AEW a little bit more than I already did.
But that's the thing, though, is that, like, yes, Cody Rhodes was immensely in many things, but he wasn't one who was trying to... Okay, he was putting himself over on the show, but he wasn't doing it to the detriment of other people for the sake of it. Because, again,
he was hurting, yes, I agree with that.
Unless your name is Anthony Ogogo.
Oh,
we never saw after that.
Because it didn't work.
Literally killed him. Sorry, buddy, he didn't kill things. Oh, no. Oh, no. Anthony Ogogo, Anthony a win.
Yeah, and Anthony had to Ogogo.
That one was, by the way, due to injuries. He suffered a torn ACL, and then afterwards, he just never got right again. But that again, we don't know that AEW tore his ACL or Cody did it, but whatever. That's kind of beside the point.
He probably dodged a bullet, all things considered. Better not to get any on him.
Right, but that's the thing, though, is that even then, Anthony Ogogo was a Nightmare Factory student. He was somebody that Cody Rhodes was trying to get over. The Young Bucks have not tried to get anyone over but themselves. Same thing with Omega, except with Paige, who was his friend, obviously.
Yeah, and at least with Omega, a long title reign actually was better for him, I think. I just wish he weren't just such a goof. Like,
Did I do that?
That was exactly what I was thinking of. That was exactly what I was thinking of, because there were moments in those matches, and in that title reign that weren't bad, and that's why I don't necessarily inherently blame Kenny Omega for any of the rating struggles. I mean, it wasn't great, but they weren't losing people really, no more than usual, no more than the women did. The women only.
I'm glad you said that because I have 2 points to make real quick. One, I think it's safe to say I'm the biggest Kenny Omega fan of the three of us. I think that's fair. I love the guy, but just stuff like that, like why? Serious Kenny Omega is one of my favorites, but it's very difficult to take him seriously when he's at his goofiest worst. He's white Montez Ford. He's white Canadian Montez Ford, and it's rough. 2, you just brought up something that I thought about a minute ago when we started discussing the problems with the EVPs. Kenny Omega at the beginning of AEW trying to, Joshify the AEW women's division, and it's
Maki Ito
and Riho, and my God, dude, the women's division from day one to all the way to even when AEW was periodically hot, like in 2021 when they had momentum, their women's division has always been absolute dumpster fire garbage.
Riho was their first World Women's Champion. Nyla Rose was the second.
Boys, I think we have a problem.
That was their precedent.
They said. That division has not recovered from that awful start.
Well, it's not just the awful start. It was also just the fact that the women that they could get were not very good, and no one was experienced or enough to know how to lead a women's match.
Well, but they did get Allison Kay, and they did get Serena.
But Serena was later on. Like, the early women's division of 2019 was Dr. Britt Baker and her posse of people who didn't know what the fuck they were doing. Rebel, who, by the way, was involved in a very bad match in TNA that Joshua made me review, and I hate him for it.
Which match was it? Oh, yeah, versus Shelly Martinez, I think.
Yeah, the original My Hole.
No, it wasn't My Hole, it was My Badge! My Badge!
My badge.
And the referee was like, what do you say? And then she said, I said my vag hurts.
Wow.
And And then she tried to do a suicide dive and missed, and she like tilted forward, and there's a bald guy in the audience who just put his head in his hands in the left part of the left corner of the screen. God, that was...
I would say AEW, but that was Impact.
Yeah, how could you hate me for showing you that instant classic? That is the room of wrestling matches.
Listen, not everything is Shayna Baszler versus Ronda Rousey at SummerSlam 2023.
That was it.
You're goddamn right.
I still haven't watched that match.
4 times now. Oh man.
I still haven't. Sean. I skipped that match when we watched SummerSlam for the review for both of our channels. I still have. Should I go back and watch that?
Yes.
Okay.
My God, yes.
Okay.
Oh.
With the acknowledgement that it's one of the best bad matches you'll ever see in your entire life.
Remember that they now subsequently pumped in crowd noise, so you have to basically watch it on mute, and that's the reaction it was getting.
Potential already a solid shoe-in for a grapply later on.
Well, I don't know, because I loved that match.
There's a lot of bad women's matches, and most of them from AEW.
Who could forget Big Swole?
No, Cedric Alexander, maybe?
But that... Okay, Cedric, you could do so much better, man. Like, what are you doing? All the fish in the sea, if that's the fish that I got, I would have just thrown my lure and just given up.
I mean, at the end of the day, it is what it is.
But that does lead into another critical problem that AEW has. When they had that whole Big Swole controversy where she was like, "There's not diverse enough," even though they literally had a transgender women's champion. How could you get more diverse than that? Like, man, my diversity. And then Tony Khan was like, we have a lot of black people here. I'm not white, and also I just think you're a shitty wrestler.
Wrestling was bad. That's why she didn't stay.
You didn't stay because your wrestling sucked. Also, we have wrestling shows tonight. Go and watch them in the same tweet.
You won't be there, though.
Yeah, and that led to a problem that Tony still has. The dude should never be on social media or in front of a camera because all he ever does is embarrass himself and the company that he owns. Tony Khan is a PR nightmare.
Tony Khan is any mark that's in his mom's basement now talking on the internet.
Yeah, a complete.
I still disagree with that, and this is going to be one of my biggest rants about this whole thing, because I have a mark in my mother's basement, and I could do way fucking better than Tony goddamn Khan. And this is one of my biggest issues with Tony, because Tony had a golden opportunity. He was Charlie who got the key to the goddamn chocolate factory. He was the guy who could have been the representation of the marks to say, hey, maybe we know more than we think we do. Maybe we actually can take a shot at this. No, wrong, stupid. Kofi Kingston. And the thing is that I took offense because Tony could have done what we all have dreamed of doing.
Yep.
But now he's the representation of all of us.
Yeah.
That pisses me off.
Honestly,
Because
same.
I bet you at least half, maybe a third of the contingent of marks that watch wrestling could do better than Tony Khan.
Just.
Notice that I reduced the qualifier there.
Yeah.
I went from half to a third.
Yeah.
But
Tony Khan, as of now, is to me. I mean, like, there are a lot of reasons not to watch AEW. I mean, they do too many things. There's no respect for moves. Chris Jericho is just a nightmare. Tony Khan is at the top of my list as to why I'm just on all aboard the fuck this company train. He is so impossible to get behind. He is He is the
He's
worst.
ruined it for the rest of us.
He's
right, like we did. I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, Josh, again, but just to kind of belabor this point, then we'll let you finish, like Kanye did. But basically, like, the thing is that Tony has now ruined it for any mark that wanted, like, say one of us won the lottery, right?
Yeah.
And then after we have all the taxes taken out and we have about $28 left, we buy some lottery. And then with that money, we started a wrestling promotion. The faith that we get from the goodwill of the people will never happen anymore. You know, because Tony Khan was the guy. He was it. He was the mark.
And with his complete and total lack of any kind of, you know, I was going to say lack of social skills, but at this point I'm like lack of having sufficient oxygen to his brain. Because of that, anyone that tries to do this is going to have a huge side eye thrown their way going, well, you don't how much cocaine do you have on you? Do you have a Twitter? Please tell me you don't.
He could have changed the narrative around pro wrestling, and instead, he exponentially made it worse.
Yep. He's a cringe machine. He's an embarrassment magnet, and he's also a massive, just frothing pussy.
He loves the sound of his own voice. Hence the media scrums and the non-stop talking, where he doesn't say anything but the non-stop talking. The Dave Meltzer's basically blowing him in the articles, which has ruined Meltzer's career.
Yeah.
Laterally speaking, Dave Meltzer has I mean, he didn't really have much credibility prior to, but like even less so now.
No. Here's the thing. Dave Meltzer did have credibility. Before AEW started, he was kind of the voice of the marks, saying that WWE's product, while profitable, was not exciting. And he preferred the matches on the indies and in Japan. And to a lot of the people in the basements of their moms' houses, he was the one that was saying, yeah, we need something different. And it was all these guys who valued Dave Meltzer's opinion that gave Dave Meltzer the platform and money he has now.
Yeah.
And absolute power corrupts.
As much as Tony Khan is.
Oh, definitely. And
so much so that I took a picture with him.
Yeah, you took a picture with him.
Yeah. Well, and the thing was that Tony started acquiring all this talent, and it looked promising, but it started very slowly turning into the trend of, yeah, he's getting all these talent, but what are they doing? And with the exception of MJF, who knew how to do things for himself because he was a student of the game, there really wasn't a whole lot of these guys who came in. You were hoping that they would make the guys who were already there better, and instead it was the opposite effect.
Yeah. And it got to a point.
Who was there, for Christ's sakes?
It got to a point where basically, whenever someone was like, we're going to go to AEW, like, all three of us were like, oh, God, no, there goes their career.
Well, even more so now. But then,
I mean, it depended on the guy. Like, remember when Rusev or Miro went to AEW, and we were excited, like, finally, Rusev's going to get used properly.
Yeah, that didn't work.
He's in a cuckold storyline with his hot, flexible wife.
Yeah.
Again.
Time is a flat circle.
Oh, God.
Remember when Aleister Black went to AEW?
Who?
Now he's Malachi Black, and he leads a shitty stable. That's the Dark Order Part 2.
They're the Moose people.
Yeah,
the Goat Men.
Yeah, the greatest of all time men in their own minds.
Yeah.
Remember how much Andrade got 5-star matches in NXT, and then he went to the main roster, and they did nothing with him there? Now he's in AEW.
And they're doing nothing with it.
And now he's doing nothing.
This is another good point, though. Because as this all was going on, before we get to, you know, the Pepsi-filled elephant in the room, another big part of what was starting to go on there was that we were starting to hear about the fights. Before the big fight,
Yep.
we heard about Eddie Kingston and Sammy getting into it. And nothing really, you just didn't see him. And then Andrade and and Sammy got into a fight, and Andrade basically, Tony Khan said, "Yeah, I'm not going to fire you if you punch Sammy." So he punched Sammy and got sent home.
Okay.
Like,
Thanks for the permission, boss.
I'll go bang Charlotte then.
God, Tony Khan is such a nutless pussy.
Well, and this is
Well,
the thing.
let's get to the Pepsi elephant then, because there's a date that we all need to talk about, and this
Yep.
is arguably the most important date in AEW's history.
Mm-hmm.
August 20th, 2021, the first episode of AEW Rampage, I think. Was it at the time?
Yeah, it was the first dance.
Yeah, it was the first dance, the first AEW Rampage in Chicago, Illinois, and CM Punk has returned to wrestling for the first time in 7 years.
Watching that video today, by the way, is so sad. Just imagine, like, if only we knew what lay ahead, we would have been like, run, Punk, run. Just go back into your exile.
No, if you had told me in a year after CM Punk arrived in AEW that he was going to piss off half of the fans and no one was going to want to watch it, I'm like, in your dreams, not going to happen. That was WWE. He's not going to cause problems here.
Well, the thing was, it didn't matter what he was going to do. It was so much more important that he was there.
Yep.
That changed everything about AEW. All of a sudden, everybody turned heads of, okay, this guy who had a very public falling out with the only game in town has now unearthed himself after years and 2 public humiliating fights in the UFC to
Yeah.
in alternative that he sees some sort of potential in. And probably similar to us, saw Tony Khan, saw what AEW was, and go, okay, it's young, it's rough around the edges, it's a little pandemic battle scarred, but there's something to be gained here. There's gems. I can work with MJF. He's going to be great. You know, I like Darby. You know, Samoa Joe, they didn't really have a deal at that point, but Joe was there. You know, there was enough people for Punk to work with that there was potential. There was just the whole potential of the thing, and Punk saw that, and I'm sure was paid a very, very, very good amount of money.
Dude, that paycheck.
Well, I want to counter something, Sean. You said it didn't matter what CM Punk did. No, it did matter. Because when he was on this show, it was watchable. There were good promos. There were good moments. There were good matches. I remember very early on, he had Powerhouse Will Hobbs' best match at a time when Powerhouse Will Hobbs was still green and still needed work. And we know he's still green and still needs work.
Yeah.
Well, and that was another thing. And to kind of piggyback onto that, we always said that. He needs work, but then we started realizing very fast, I don't think they're going to get better here. Because they had all of these agents. They had Dean Malenko, they had Arn Anderson, they had, you mentioned Jake. They had everybody was still doing all the same shit.
It was infuriating at a point because you have all of these minds backstage and no one is doing anything. And it's not like they were afraid to rock the boat because Tony Khan is such a doormat. But maybe it wasn't they were scared of pissing off Tony Khan. Maybe they didn't want to rub the EVPs the wrong way and start a bunch of drama.
Yeah. Well, and you think about JR and how just gutted he was
Dude.
with personality. And, I don't want to mention the commentary because
We've said it every time we've watched AEW shows. The commentary has always been terrible. None of us like Excalibur. We all want Taz, but we don't get enough of Taz. Tony Schiavone is the worst.
That's not really the largest problem. That's really the least of the issues. It doesn't help. It certainly doesn't help. But if I were to make changes, commentary would not be the first place I would make those changes.
Yeah, well, first thing would just not bring JR anymore because Like, that man lost his soul long ago. You were just beating a carcass at this point. Just
Now,
let
from
the...
what I hear, he has taken a hiatus. He is actually, I think, for health issues, but he is at this moment.
Remember that one show where they used some kind of weapon and JR on commentary said that they had predetermined weapons and your jaw hit the floor? I remember you talking about that in one of our reviews.
Yeah. Well, because JR, the thing is, for good or bad, JR told it like it was. And that made for some hilarious moments, but he also was shitting on your own program.
Yeah.
You know, which begs the question, why are you having programming this bad that you have a commentator that's shitting on it? Maybe change the programming instead of blaming the commentator. Remember people blamed JR?
For pointing out, like, valid criticisms?
Facts about what was going on.
No, let us delude ourselves into thinking that this show is literally the second coming of Christ.
Well, the reason why is because it's not WWE. As long as it's not WWE, I'm good with it.
Yeah, I remember when I had that attitude back in my youngin' days.
Well,
The Kofiism that AEW fans, I've never seen fans so loyal to a product that's so bad in its history. I mean, yes, I'm sure it's happened before with wrestling companies because of certain stars or like certain people that were involved. But I've never seen fans
still alive to this day. Think about
But
it.
I've never seen a fan base like AEW that's just so rabid about this show and are so into this show when it's so not good.
And also on top of that, because of that, it's the tribalism is so insane. Like, and tribalism is already bad enough in any kind of fan base and anything you watch, so it's like a useless endeavor to try to talk to anyone on the internet about any kind of show that you like. But with AEW and WWE to that extent, like, it's either you are on the side of WWE and you are literally a chosen savior from God because you love this company and AEW represents Satan and the devil, or it's the complete and total opposite and there's no in between.
Well, the only other tribalism that reminds me of AEW's, even though it's to a lot lesser of an extent now, but is WWE's themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, Kevin Dunn put Terry Funk in a pair of pantyhose because he was afraid that his audience would not know who Terry Funk was. Now, everybody did know who Terry Funk was, so that didn't work. But there is some speck of truth behind that. Nick Aldis is a brand new face to a lot of people in WWE, even though we all know who he is and we all like his work. Mostly. And, there is some, like Adam Pearce. It took Adam Pearce 3 years as a WWE official for people to even give a shit that he actually ever wrestled. There are some people in WWE I'm sure don't know that.
I honestly, I've never seen an Adam Pearce match.
People still walk up to Kurt Angle and wonder where he was. That is a true statement.
And I believe it.
It's like, and poor TNA, because I think that TNA was best matches. He had some of the best matches in his career at TNA.
While he was abusing drugs.
Well, I'm not. As is the tradition in the wrestling business, so.
Yeah, tune in next time for Dark Side of the Ring. But yeah.
And that's the thing, though, is that, like, when it comes down to it, like, there's a tribalism that exists in AEW and continues to exist in AEW that really is pathetic on so many levels.
Agreed. Like,
well, it's only gotten more pathetic because
the more people that stop watching, the more you whittle it down to the most deluded and deranged fans that are like, nope, it only has one W instead of two, and it's not Vince McMahon, even though Vince McMahon is technically not even around anymore in WWE. They've dug their heels in so deep that they are so And even me, I was a fan of AEW like earlier on. But even at the height of I actually like this show. I would still be like, but I don't like that. But I don't like that. Remember when Marco Stunt would floss on TV and I would whine about it because it was stupid?
Marco
Yes, we remember.
Stunt. Period.
Marco Stunt existing, period. That Rana botch on the Dark Order guy.
Evil Uno where he ran over to the post.
Yep. Christ. The only good thing about that was that led to the first time I was ever censored on the Court Martial podcast. That was fun.
Oh, there was, well, yeah, and then there was...
No, you had 2 censors. You had 2 censors.
Well, that was at Revolution, and that same year they had WrestleMania where I made that Logan Paul joke that started my feud with the Keebler Elves.
That's right.
I mean, again, to be fair with the Keebler Elves, what you said wouldn't really be allowed.
You know what? Honestly, true.
Yeah, but in any case, it was,
Oh, God. I'm still coughing and sick and whatever.
it's just, well, it's the disgusting taste in our mouths that AEW, but we could palate a lot of it when CM Punk was kind of rounding things out.
The product.
Everyone else in AEW was stepping up their game,
Yeah.
except for the kids in the sandbox who were all pouty because the bigger Tonka truck was in the hands of CM Punk.
The quality of the show improved for a little while, and it made me very hopeful. And then Revolution 2022 happened, and oh look, there's a cliff. Let's not drive off of it. Oh, we drove off of it, and now we're on fire, and everyone's dying and screaming. And what happened? How did we get to the bottom of the mountain? And oh, there's still fire. Oh, now everything. Oh God, the Earth has. We've found a sinkhole. How could? At some point, we're going to have to hit rock bottom.
Well, no, that's happening at WrestleMania. That's the other show. In any case, the thing about Revolution 2022 was, I think a better analogy would be that a gigantic, almost like a comically large bomb fuse was lit. And it was a slow burn, but from there until September, and all the wild shit that happened in between, including some things that were out of AEW's control that hurt it badly.
Yeah. Remember, like, they had injury after injury after injury after injury, which is partially, I will say it's partially their fault because of the style they allow people to, utilize and pound into the ground, where it's a wonder more people aren't injured.
Yeah.
And that gave birth to the angry wrestling gods coming out with the scythe.
Yeah. Well, and we also have to remember that while the CM Punk was showing up in AEW, WWE was taking the sickle to their roster.
And also, at that same time...
Vince even joked about it.
Yep.
He's like, oh, you worried about AEW signing him? I was like, well, they need talent. We can help them with that.
My God.
That is a paraphrasing, but that was an actual press conference sentence from Vince and Kennedy McMahon.
And it was crazy because AEW was building so much momentum, and WWE was so awful. Remember, like, the first show that CM Punk came back to wrestle for was All Out. Opposing All Out was Extreme Rules, which had Roman Reigns versus Finn Balor, and that turnbuckle.
Oh.
And the lights, and Finn Balor humping the floor.
Yeah.
And then they slowly started to switch play. Although the beginning of 2022 was rough, because we had the beginning of the end with AEW Revolution, and then a few months later, and that same month, or a couple weeks before, we had that awful Royal Rumble, and that led to the worst WrestleMania of all time. Things were just so bad at early 2022, man.
We were pretty dejected about professional wrestling in general.
Yeah.
All three of us were.
Yeah.
To the point where you debated where not to shut down the podcast.
Yeah.
Which I'm glad we did. In hindsight. By the way, this is also an edition of the Court Martial podcast. We just decided to have kind of a chaotic. So who knows what show this is anyway? But
Yeah.
In any case,
It'll be on someone's channel at some point, sometime, maybe.
But the good thing is that we did explore other avenues, and I'd like to get back to some of that actually, because I'm now only working one job now, so I've got a lot more free time than I used to.
Yeah.
So
that was happening. Not to jerk ourselves off too much, but that was happening in the middle of the whole TAW versus CIW thing, and that went very, very well.
Yeah, well, then that was the other thing too, in that we were managing other programs as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we were doing our own fantasy booking, which is one of the benefits of AEW showing up.
Yeah.
Is that it really did help our podcast get off the ground.
Yeah.
To some degree, because it allowed us to go, all right, well, we've got a lot of roster space here. Let's go flex our creative guns, because I knew at that point in 2020 when Skyler and I started that deal that we were probably going to book better than the two entities that were showing up, and lo and behold, they took most of our ideas, Skyler.
They're still taking your ideas to this day.
To this day.
Which I still want the royalties for, thank you.
That's right. So, but it's true, it's like that's the funny thing about all of this is that we kind of had our own little boost out of that, but April of 2022, we were all just about done with the professional wrestling business.
Yeah, like,
and
it was bad.
It was, but you still believed in Punk. But then, and if I may quote the wonderful Series of Unfortunate Events trailer for the Jim Carrey version, and then the unthinkable happened.
Yep.
Vince McMahon gets caught fucking paralegals.
Literally caught with his pants down.
Yeah. And has to step down and quote-unquote retire. And that might be the worst stroke of luck AEW could have possibly gotten.
Amen to that. Because, again,
what AEW benefited from was WWE's not trying at all.
Their biggest drawing factor was the big bad McMahon is over there. We don't have a big bad McMahon. We have a big bad Khan. But that's neither here nor there. But
we didn't know it at the time. That's the thing, is that the biggest draw that AEW had is, hey, we're not booked by Vince McMahon. We're a safe place for people. You can come and watch our shows because Vince McMahon is not here.
They don't have to make sense, but it's not Vince.
Yeah. And that was enough for a lot of people.
Because it was not Vince. Because the Vince McMahon is the biggest heel in wrestling, on and off screen.
And honestly, I've actually come, say what you want, now that Vince is really not as much involved in the actual creative, and Triple H has actually done a pretty decent job of getting some key names actually over.
Mm-hmm.
To the point where I really do feel with WWE we have proper stars again.
It's been so long since we've had that.
But we have some.
It feels like we have somebody that wants to genuinely still be in the professional wrestling business.
Yeah. But that was also part of the problem. Because the second that Vince left, all of those people who were all about not Vince McMahon with AEW were now curious to go, okay, so what are you going to do then? We all liked NXT. And we liked before Vince went and ruined that too.
Before he jizzed all over it with all those rainbow colors.
Yeah. But we liked, in NXT, we liked what he brought to the table. And SummerSlam 2022 changed quite a lot.
That was a turning point.
It was. It definitely was, because it was definitely a, look, we are heading in a different direction here. There was a faction literally named Damage Control, which never really was that, but it was more symbolic symbolic than it really was actually long-term plans, as it turns out.
And from that pay-per-view or premium live event, other than Extreme Rules, which I still don't think Extreme Rules 2022 was a bad show. It was just an show. From that show, we have not had we've had a couple shows, but we haven't had a truly awful show in over a year, which for WWE, that's impressive.
Here's the thing, though. There's one specific event that changed everything to the point where, like, okay, I know things are not perfect with WWE, but I'm willing to give them a chance. There was one specific match that did that for all three of us. And funny enough, it happened at the show after, at Clash of the Castle, involving Gunther and Sheamus.
Oh, that was such a good match.
That really was defining. But I would almost argue that Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar at SummerSlam's main event was more impactful in that regard.
That's actually the one I thought you were referring to, Skyler.
I'll tell you why. I totally agree with you with the way that match was built with Gunther and Sheamus, both in storyline and as well as like from start to finish. That match is maybe one of my favorite WWE matches, period. Love that match. Not taking anything away from it at all. It won match of the year. It was no dispute. But the reason I'm saying that it's Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar was that how many times did we get Roman Reigns versus Brock Lesnar up to that point, to the point where we've seen that match, the same match, every time they've had it, the exact same match, all the time. And
it was almost a meme.
But what they did at SummerSlam was completely change everything about their dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
And that was what was really, I mean, from the jumping off the tractor to the lifting of the ring, it was an Attitude Era holy shit style match, but it got us.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the thing about that match, is like, okay, you've taken what normally would be ho-hum, who gives a shit, it's the same thing, come as it comes, F5 spears, and that's the whole match. They turned that match into something worth watching. And that's what signaled to me this company is heading in a different direction. And symbolically speaking, I think that carried more weight long term. And then when you add on top of that, the match that Gunther and Sheamus had, where they defined one star who had been there for a long time that got a first motivation, and a new star that cemented him as a guy who was a must-watch entertainer.
And resurrected a championship that we thought was dead.
Yeah. So it was a 1-2 punch, but I think at the end of it, it really came down to that one night. Because if Triple H fumbles that night, we may be talking about a completely different situation.
But the reason why I want to bring, like, Clash of the Castle and that specific match over is because, yes, SummerSlam, we're like, okay, we're willing to watch from now on and see what happens. But the thing about that particular match was it was so good and it was so well done. And as you said it, Sean, at the time, it was like watching a match from Memphis with Jerry Lawler and watching him wrestle somebody, and the selling and the moves and everything. It signaled a change in WWE. Now, we have not gotten to the point yet where that change is throughout the entire company because, let's be honest, Monday Night Raw matches are still not that great. But when Gunther is there, it changes.
The dude has proven to be a ratings draw.
Well, and I also will mention, and ratings draw is another big point of this. Because once Triple H took control, Vince started tuning back in. I mean, truthfully, the fact that they're averaging right now, like, 2 to 3 million viewers for Raw and SmackDown, that's pretty good compared to where they were heading. They were getting 1.5s, 1.4s. And for Raws, when Vince was, really taking the helm there.
But at the same
Helm's Lee who changed things.
But at the same time, while things were changing for the better in WWE, What was happening at the same time in the other company?
Well,
Oh, we're not worried. We're not concerned. We're going to easily beat WWE. Isn't that right, CM Punk?
well, this is where leadership turns out to be. A change in leadership would have been nice for both teams, but unfortunately, one team did not have the luxury.
Tony Khan was like, no, it's all right. I've got this. And everyone was like, that's a bold strategy, Khan. Let's see if it works out for him.
Tony Khan's disciplinary action was take no action. And so,
Let the wound fester until it got infected to the point where we have to amputate the limb.
if I
In
close
case
my
you guys are wondering what we're talking about All Out 2022, specifically the press conference that happened with CM Punk and then the fight that happened afterwards.
And the lead up, the lead up before that with the whole Adam Page going off script and pissing off CM Punk, and then Punk getting injured and stewing about it for months. And then coming back and giving Adam Page a receipt and then getting injured again.
And the funny part was that at the time, we just thought, okay, that's just a weird promo. We didn't realize at the time that this was going to be the promo that kind of set everything in motion.
Well, and this is where also, if Tony Khan had any sort of like cognitive ability, he would have known. If CM Punk got mad at Vince McMahon for being a dick with business practices, with that are at least somewhat professional, even though they may be dickish in nature and vicious and ruthless. If CM Punk was willing to make that much of a stink, Tony Khan not realizing that CM Punk going and seeing that the inmates are running the entire asylum and the EVPs have a massive abuse of power, and Adam Page, just for being friends of them, is allowed to just potato people for no reason because he thinks he's standing up for Colt Cabana. That was why this all started. And instead of doing anything about it,
Hey, Sean.
That happened in June. That happened in June.
Let's also not forget another important ingredient. Hey, Sean, did you know that what I'm doing is good enough already and I don't need to take advice?
Well, and that's the thing is, I used to get mad at Adam Page for that, but the reality is that is a company-wide policy.
Yep.
Because we mentioned it like 45 minutes ago. Dean Malenko, Arn Anderson, JR, Jake the Snake Roberts. All of these people who were there to issue wisdom and impart professional wrestling knowledge, successful professional wrestling knowledge. All of these people, every last one of them, was told basically, hi, go fuck yourself. We're doing what we're doing, and that's why we got Tony Khan's money to begin with.
But what we're already doing is good because we know what we're doing because we're perfect, because our fans that are so totally not isolated and in an echo chamber, they already love us. So why would we try? Which is another huge Tony Khan problem, which is he already has his niche fan base. And he's like, I already have my fans. Why would I need more? Which...
Well, and that's the result, really, of being a son of a billionaire.
Yeah. Because...
This is truthfully, I think, what we would have gotten if Shane had gotten the book.
Possibly.
I truthfully... I mean, I think Shane would do a better job. I think Shane would do a better job than Tony, though.
Shane at least would have been able to conduct himself way better on camera.
Well, you say that. But...
Yeah, I remember a specific best in the world.
Ugh.
Yeah. Which was a complete jab at CM Punk anyway. And WWE literally prodding the bear. And that was another thing. I think just for the fact that we were all so hyped for CM Punk because we had been hearing his name chanted in WWE for their garbage program because he was so right about it for almost a decade.
Mm-hmm.
And then here he is, and that was the thing. And when the fight broke out, and then we started figuring out, well, what's going on, and we're going to get an investigation, and this is where Tony started exposing himself. Let alone the purchase of Ring of Honor. I don't even think that's relevant. I mean, it's relevant to the story, but it's not relevant to the story because, like, what does Ring of Honor meant to AEW and Tony Khan's bottom line?
It's literally like a dead weight that you've surgically attached to your own body, but it's dead weight and it's just hanging there doing nothing, except it's noticeable, and you're like, why did you surgically attach that to yourself? It just makes you look bloated and weird. That's ROH and AEW right now.
The idea that we had at the time with our logic and mindset was that, okay, they bought Ring of Honor, which is good because it saves one of the companies that's been around for a long time and kind of was the start of where a lot of these AEW talents come from. And you bought their tape library, which denies it from WWE, which is yay, another thing that's not going to be WWE's possession. And what they can do is that they could use it as a developmental company, because at the time they had so many names, and they didn't have a place to put all of them. Now you could put the young talent there, and you could have them learn from the wrestlers and figure out what they're doing before they get to AEW.
But no, let's not do that.
Before we found out that Chris Jericho decided that he would declare war against a dead company.
Yeah. Good God. That happened.
By becoming the dead company's champion. And saying that every champion before him was a pain in the ass, including the bald Swiss guy, until the fact that he lost the title back to the bald Swiss guy.
And now ROH is just like hollow AEW Junior, which is just kind of there and no one really cares. And now AEW has like 20 different championships, so the value of being a champion has never meant less.
That's another thing too that's come up, is that like the number of titles that AEW has, for all intents and purposes, is stupid.
It's infuriating. Like when I watched Wrestle Dream a couple months ago, literally every match had at least 2 champions in it, and I got I got so pissed. I was like, it's like Syndrome in The Incredibles. If everyone's super, then no one will be. How do you? It's basic psychology. How do you not get that? You're Tony Khan and you don't have a brain. That's how.
I mean, he employed a guy that didn't have a brain, but that's a whole other thing.
Was that Shibata?
Oh my God! Dear God.
I mean, he had a brain, it's just they had to remove it briefly.
Well, they put it back, I think.
Taken Tony's out and just left it out. but this leads to another kind of discussion here. Before we get into the really major drama with the EVPs and Punk, where the whole faith of the viewers was lost, we have to talk about the regression of talent that was overall promising in the interests of trying to push younger talent like and truthfully, do either of you feel like Wheeler Yuta is a star now here in the year of our Lord 2023, towards the end of the year?
More like...
It feels like nothing's changed with them.
More like Wheeler Huda, because who dat?
Yeah, exactly.
Who's that?
Exactly. But think about the people that Wheeler Yuta has been in the ring with, that has faced and beaten.
Let me put it this way. I went to an indie show a couple weeks ago, an IWA show, which was a charity show for a wrestler around my neck of the woods who has cancer or something. There was a wrestler in a tag team match who was a heel who looked almost exactly like Wheeler Yuta, except he was more convincing, his in-ring work was better, and he actually, had a presence about him. Like, he came off like a slimy douche, and the crowd hated him, and he got pinned, and the crowd cheered. And then he sold, and just him and his tag team partners sold in the ring for like 10 minutes, just dead on the earth, unmoving as the crowd left. That dude, that I don't even know if he has a name. He might have been born without one. I care more about that guy than Wheeler Yuta. Same look, same hair, same facial hair, same build, except, 1,000 times more believable and better. And that was an indie show that had like 30, 40 people.
Yeah, and the thing is that Tony really isn't above that mindset of the indie show with 30 or 40 people.
Oh, and speaking of people like Wheeler Yuta, I'm going to bring up one of your favorites, Sean, because I just want to hear your guttural, just disgust, like bile.
Is it Man Scout Jake Manning?
No, I was gonna say, what are your thoughts on a very promising AEW prospect that Tony Khan keeps pushing for some reason, Danny Garcia?
I honestly, if you asked me to pick out Danny Garcia in front of a lineup, I don't know if I'd be able to do it.
Remember when
I genuinely don't.
Remember when
Even
he
though he beat Bryan Danielson, I genuinely don't.
I was just about to say, remember when he beat Danielson?
Exactly, yes. Because the thing that bothers me too is that Tony has preyed upon people's willingness to cooperate with his bullshit. Like, Bryan Danielson's too nice. Mick Foley would do this. Mick Foley would put over Danny Garcia because he's just so nice and he's trying to help.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can't blame Danielson for that. But I also think that maybe Danielson's idea of what a good match is not my idea of a good match. But
yeah.
That's just... But it's not just Danielson. Look at what Moxley's become.
Ugh.
Look at what Jon Moxley has become from the time that he left WWE, where at least they had to polish him up to a somewhat decent presentation, to now, where people, I remember people comparing Dean fucking Ambrose to Rowdy Roddy Piper.
I remember that too. I remember
context of Jon Moxley.
I remember when I thought that Dean Ambrose was cool. That was a long time ago.
I'll give you a better one. I remember when I thought Jon Moxley was cool.
I remember when I enjoyed watching Dean Ambrose wrestle.
And then he got Nick Gage on the show and cut Chris Jericho while a pizza commercial for happened.
See, that's the kind of meme type shit that just makes me laugh about this company, though. Because that was part of the appeal, too. It's like, all the shit that was really bad, there was some level of hilarity to it.
Yep.
Jade Cargill showing up in the middle of Cody Rhodes doing a theatric promo, and him going, "Can I help you?"
Yesterday was the anniversary of its open mic night, bitch.
Yeah. And fucking Shaq wrestled a match.
69, me Kenny.
Got into a... Oh, God. It's like, and amidst all of that, there was still good faith in that company. Everything got exposed between Punk and the Bucks and Omega and Mega, or Megan, or whatever her name is, the lawyer who was involved in that, the big confrontation. Jericho being the ultimate politician to get his way after in the fallout.
Yep.
But the whole fight that went down, we may never know exactly what happened in that room that day.
Mm-hmm.
We have enough accounts that we have an idea of what happens.
Yeah, but I don't know. I still don't know, because I think that I'm not so sure what Omega's role in it was. He had bite marks, but why? But there's a sick wife involved that Ace Steel was trying to protect, and there was a storm barging into doors. But let's talk about that media scrum promo real quick. Because that, to be fair to the Bucks and Kenny, was a really unprofessional way to go about airing your grievances about the EVPs.
Yep.
And Tony was ballless to not kick him under the table and go, Ixnay, like, bro, like, come on, dude, like, let's talk about this backstage. But you have to imagine that this had been discussed, and Tony just let it fester, like you said, Josh.
Tony Khan, when Punk was going off, Tony Khan looked like a little kid at a kitchen table who wants his parents to stop shouting.
Dude, oh my God.
It was sad.
That is
It was the biggest.
most accurate thing I've heard in this entire hour and 38-minute podcast.
It was the biggest deer in headlights. Please let this end. Please let this end.
Tony Khan was thinking, This is why I hate Thanksgiving. That was the look on his face the entire time.
And the thing was that, again, with all of this stuff, with everything that was happening at the time, like, yeah, we were hearing about stuff that was happening backstage, but we didn't know who it was or what it involved. So when CM Punk did it, for better or worse, he exposed everybody in AEW for what they had been doing for the past few years. And now, the stuff that we hear backstage, because people are more willing to talk about it.
Well, and that kind of leads to a point that I'd like to make about Punk. Because, yes, you can argue the unprofessionalism, but when has CM Punk ever been incorrect?
Tell him when he's telling lies.
Name me once when Punk has been wrong about whatever he's been talking about, whether it's WWE's grievances, even though those may have been a little exaggerated considering how many concessions they made him, but I digress. And also, it's kind of the same deal with AEW, but I digress. But it's, at the same time, he wouldn't say the things unless he meant them, unless he believed them, and truthfully, CM Punk is not an idiot. He knows that if he sparks controversy creates cash. He graduated from the Eric Bischoff School of say the controversial shit because people are going to talk about your name afterwards.
And also, he wouldn't have done that if he wasn't pushed to it.
Yes, agreed. And why Adam Page, at the end of all this, why Adam Page was rewarded for all of this.
Nauseating.
That's where I really started taking problems. Like the Crown of Thorns match.
Oh, God.
Yes.
I forgot about that. Ironically enough, funnily enough, my reaction to that was Jesus Christ.
You want to know, Skyler, the whole point of the you want to know when my disdain for AEW or my detachment from AEW began, that was the moment. Adam Page and Adam Cole in that throwaway match on Dynamite where they put a crown of barbed wire on Adam Cole's head and dead-eyed him through the table onto the ring floor for a 2 count.
That's the most AEW thing I've heard all day.
When their parent company had just been merged with a bigger company with a female in charge. I'm just saying.
Who have been known for the Food Network channel and PG programming.
Yeah, and that was, if they were going to be incompetent enough to allow that to air, when it was Nick Gage and the pizza thing, that was just coincidence. That was just hilarious coincidence. But it at the same time, like, you can forgive some of that for inexperience. We're 3 years in at this point.
Yeah, there's no excuse for that.
This happened. And that's where it ended for me. I was like, okay, I've had enough. And then this whole thing with CM Punk starts going down, and that's really where I was fearful. But then we started seeing Tony Khan's true colors. And I went to a show in Bridgeport, which was their lowest drawing show to date. That is a 10,000-seat arena in Bridgeport, and less than 3,000, I think exactly 3,000 people showed up.
Wasn't that the show where during the middle of one of the TV breaks, they had security guy Bob wrestle against Super...
In a rock, paper, scissors match, yes. And even an AEW faithful was like, oh man, that killed my vibe. And he walked out of that room. If folks, you want to hear that review with Abe Bizzle, who I went to that show with, it is in this channel. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And you can get the entire anthology of the Core Martial podcast and whatever TW has gleaned off the internet. Continue, Scott.
Over there. I cannot walk.
It's just, I don't know. And then what happens here with Punk and the Bucks is that actually during that show that they reveal that the Elite and the Young Bucks are the ones who are going to be back. Okay. And Punk had just left. And that really said everything you needed to know. Punk was getting punished for telling the truth. And the Elite were going to be the ones, because they're the EVPs and they're Tony's friends that they started with from the start. They were going to have no punishment, even though they were the ones who instigated the little incident.
Yep, that they barged into his locker room after he was clearly pissed, and they got a slap on the wrist. Like,
however,
seriously?
It's not like they didn't have cause to go in there. It's just they shouldn't have barged in there.
The whole thing was just one right after the other. Probably shouldn't have done that. Probably shouldn't have done that. You probably shouldn't have done that. You probably shouldn't have said that.
Wrong move, and then wrong move, and then wrong move, and then wrong move.
It was a choose your own It was a choose your own adventure story where you kept choosing the worst outcome.
Yeah, and thankfully it's not one of those football books, because then like 2 plays in you lose the game. And then you have to go back to the beginning. But I'm dating myself there. I don't know if anyone knows what the fuck I'm talking about.
And then, honestly, after that, what I noticed was just for like the next while, even when CM Punk was gone until he returned again, there was an uptick in just the sheer amount of backstage drama on a constant basis, to where like AEW was like a kindergarten. Where all the teachers, the staff, the administrators, and the substitute teachers just decided to not go to school that day and just let the kids be in charge, and they were surprised when they saw that the school was on fire.
And the ratings reflected that.
Yep. It was embarrassing.
Some of the worst numbers that they ever had.
Meanwhile, and another thing that was just infuriating, the EVPs were going out on TV and making fun of Punk in the middle of the ring, and then just to even further just show how stupid and detached from reality and immature they are, they had the gall to have that match between Colt Cabana versus Chris Jericho on Dynamite just because of the issues that was going on.
And that's really what exaggerated it, was all the pettiness that came afterward. But it wasn't just from them. That's the thing. Then all the other cronies started outing themselves, like Adam Page and Jack Perry.
Oh, we'll get to Jack Perry.
Who became the straw that broke the camel's back, little did we know. But if you recall, Jack Perry sat and ate baked goods during a media scrum where he and Dino Funk...
You mean Phil Brooks.
But sure. And it's just when they did it was just... Jack Perry, they outed themselves. All of the ones that were in that little clan they outed themselves as a cult, and Tony Khan sat there going, if I close my eyes, it's not there.
But yep, that was exactly his attitude. Pretend it's not there and maybe it'll go away.
That's right. Hey, while everybody is sitting here for just a second, I just want to say one thing really, really clearly, and that is that I had to change the tracks, which is why I'm kind of filibustering this podcast for a second. And we're back!
We reached a settlement.
That's right. Well, but Tony Khan might have a lot of things to settle, but then that was the talk. Lawsuits, right? Because then, well, Punk had a hell of a case to make. But Punk tried to make it work, and here's where Tony Khan got bit in the ass. All of a sudden, the network's like, well, CM Punk's really the only one who's drawing ratings, so why don't we give you a new show and we'll let CM Punk? And that's the only way you're going to get a TV deal.
Because the network realized that CM Punk was the only draw in AEW that could reliably get viewers, and they were trying to find a way to still make it work with CM Punk and make it work with the Bucks and Omega and whatever, so they could continue to have a big star on the show. The problem that they didn't realize was that the Bucks and Omega had no intention of doing that.
Because they were so obsessed with them.
Themselves.
And the problem is, here's where I will take some of the heat off Kenny Omega and place it onto somebody else. Because I believe that after about 2 or 3 months of it, Kenny Omega was just done. Right? He was like, look, man, it's like, it happened. I don't like that it happened, but, like, I'm trying to move on, right? He even said as much.
Yeah, he wanted to do business.
I did genuinely feel for him there because I genuinely think that he is pussy enough to just be like, let's just move on. Right? Like, I get it. And I think
that not only just pussy enough, but also just the whole thing of, like, look, I just want to get forward. I want to move forward. I want to try and see if we can do something.
I want to make money.
He has some idea of, like, I'm tired of this fighting. I just want to do what's good for me and move on to something else.
Yeah, I respect Kenny Omega for his level of integrity throughout the whole thing. Because, like, yeah, he could have gone there and been, like, super dramatic like the Bucks were and kind of publicly humiliated. And he did have his little share in that during those Elite versus the Death Triangle best of 7 that nobody gave a single shit about.
I didn't watch any of those 7 matches, just saying.
Me either. But the whole point of it, it's like, when Kenny Omega was by himself, he was just like, dude, let's just move on from this. Like, I really, he's a guy who was focused on his own career, and I cannot fault the man for that. I genuinely don't. But the person who deserves the blame is Chris Jericho. Mm-hmm. Because Chris Jericho took that opportunity where there was that much dissension to go, well, hey, I'm a pretty reliable guy, and I was abducted by aliens, so why don't you use all of my ideas? And Chris Jericho positioned himself to where he was basically running AEW, and the ratings bombed because everything that he touched was horrible.
God.
And at the same time, Triple H was slowly rebuilding he was rebuilding WWE. Slowly but ever so surely, he was making sure he was rebuilding the pieces of WWE, getting talent over, getting people over, keeping Roman Reigns fresh. Sami Zayn was getting attention. Kevin Owens felt important. People started feeling important again, while simultaneously, Chris Jericho put his stamp of stank on AEW more than he ever had before, and that turned out to be probably more damaging than anything that has happened since.
Yeah, that was rough.
Pardon me while I pee. Not on air.
I was about to say.
But that's the best part.
I was about to say, why don't you pull a Skyler real quick and just let it fly? I mean, we're talking about AEW and we're taking the piss out of them, so you might as well.
Something I feel, and I just want to, like, get this over, like, when it comes down to it with AEW and just their whole thing. Okay, thanks, Sean. Anyways,
welcome. You're about to hear it.
Oh no.
Something I
want to
move on with AEW and just kind of, like, emphasize that this felt like a company that was just, it was in the middle of nowhere, going nowhere, and they were desperate for any type of help, and they were desperate for anything that they could do, and they started doing more gimmicky stuff and more gimmicky stuff than they ever did before, and it didn't work. None of it did.
It smells horrible.
And again, they kept finding success in ways that they should not have. Everyone still, to their goddamn minds, loves the fact that they went to Wembley, when really, Wembley was... It was almost like another All Out.
Yeah.
And it was just like, the reason why you were successful was not because AEW was a good product. The reason why you were successful was because people in England and Europe in general wanted to go to a wrestling show.
They were starved for a wrestling show.
Well, we're burying the lead here a little bit. Just a little bit. Because, well, first of all, thank you for everyone who bared with me peeing in a bucket for you the fans.
I could just barely hear it over Skyler's monologue, and it was glorious.
Great.
I just had to make sure I was loud enough so that way no one would hear it.
Why don't you retroactively take your own advice?
In any case, the thing that we are glossing over is that at this point, when the network said we want CM Punk and Collision, they made a very different product that all of a sudden, even throughout all the ratings drops and Jericho taking hold of the show, Collision, everybody's heads turned to go, okay, maybe they do have something going on here. And this is in the light of FTR and the Briscoes having incredible matches in Ring of Honor that hardly anybody saw. But then, all of the talent that was kind of in Punk's camp, the pro wrestling camp, congregated in Collision, and for a solid month and a half, that was the most watchable program in pro wrestling.
Agreed. Collision, for like the first month or two, was a great show.
But the fascinating thing is that show was set up to fail because it was put on Saturday night against WWE pay-per-views.
Yep.
And then every AEW mark that was in the camp of the elite, whether Omega's involved or not, or the Jericho elite, as I'm going to start referring it to, but everyone in that camp started going, you see, they can't draw. Even though they're going against the $3 million or 3 million viewer pay-per-view or premium live event of WWE, and they draw 400,000. Well, of course they're gonna. They're just a TV show compared against a giant juggernaut event. Like, what do you think's gonna happen? Like
that all of that, and the fact that even though it was a different show and a quasi pseudo brand split, kind of, they were still under one company with unresolved issues, and Collision was built on top of a time bomb.
Well, it wasn't just built on top of a time bomb. It was also built with this whole thing in mind that we have a self-sustaining fan base. And this fan base, without attracting any new people or trying to attract new people, will keep us going. Here's the problem. Fans keep disappearing from this show. It's the same now 700 to 800,000 people who watch the show with very little difference in mind. At some point, you have to get new people to watch this show. You have to get new people to watch your product because, and this is very important, they're not going to be around forever.
Well, and another part of that, too, that adds this... Because Tony is a multi-billionaire, he's not worried about this company making money. And that attitude is largely responsible for why Tony has probably enacted the hands-off policy he has, because he doesn't really have to care. Because he's got money up the fucking ass.
Mm-hmm.
To play around with, and that's why the network, even though they wanted, CM Punk, and they still do, and that was the deal, but Tony had so much goddamn money to spend, and still does. And that's where Tony's demeanor came into play. I think what happened when this happened is that this whole program was set up to fail, and then the EVPs decided, or at least the Bucks did. I think Omega probably wanted to resolve things, but at least the Bucks did. They started fucking with CM Punk because they didn't want him there. Jericho was going to go with the side that was going to give him the most money, which was Tony.
No, he was going to go with the side that was going to give him the most power. Remember, Chris Jericho's whole thing is that he's the Hulk Hogan that's in WCW, and he wants to be the one to decide how and where things are going.
Yeah, and in many ways, CM Punk is the Bret Hart to Jericho's Hogan.
Kind of, yeah.
In a lot of ways, because Jericho never wanted to work with Punk, even in WWE. I don't really think he did. Maybe it was a better faith then than it is now. But even to that point, like, I don't think there was ever an intention to do it. I think Jericho found Punk beneath him still, and Jericho was going to do the thing that benefited Chris Jericho the most, including getting abducted by aliens while he was hammered. And then the lying really that Jericho started getting into, that really was what cemented him as the Hulk Hogan of AEW. But what I think it all manifested itself again in All In at Wembley, which was basically sold just because London is starved for wrestling promotions.
Yep.
So they were going to give AEW the shot, which is why they sold a ton of tickets before there was a single match announced.
Which is kind of indicative. Like, on one hand, they sold an entire huge 80,000 seater with no matches announced. At the same time, they sold a wrestling show to a bunch of people that have not seen very many wrestling shows and desperately wanted one. And it honestly isn't that impressive of an accomplishment. I mean, it's an impressive accomplishment, but within the context.
Something about Wembley was a very big deal because Wembley is a big arena, and they got a lot of money selling out that show. They did good business that day.
Yep.
The problem was that they didn't have to work for that business.
Exactly.
They didn't have to try.
The build for All In was not great.
No. Well, and I bet you, I almost guarantee you with the way things are now, if they tried to do that again, it would not be successful.
They are trying next year, and I hope I'm very curious to see if they even get like half as many.
Well, but beyond all
they're
that,
gonna get people to go because ultimately they don't get many wrestling shows out there. I'm just curious to see what WWE does to counter it. Oh wait, they're going to Germany.
Yeah, WWE has really tapped into internet, and that's one of the geniuses of whoever is planning these routes. They're putting premium live events in markets that are fresh for wrestling. And it's really helped the dynamic in WWE as far as the crowd reaction goes. They're still pumping in crowd noise, but it's not nearly as much because they don't have to work as hard because they've got crowds that are starved for wrestling shows, especially major wrestling shows. But the bottom line here is what happens at All In is Punk, who had in the weeks leading up to this had admitted that the way that he had went about airing his grievances during the All Out conference was wrong, and he shouldn't have done it like that, and he apologized to Tony for it. In addition to him now wanting Jack Perry to use fake glass because you'll hurt yourself, use fake glass because you won't hurt yourself, and Jack Perry taking that as an act of 12-year-old toddler defiance.
But I want to do it. I want to do my spot. Why you tell me I can't do my spot?
Which all things considered is just for the health and benefit of the guy who's in it. From every account that I've ever heard, Punk has only tried to help people. Maybe his approach may not be stellar. I won't lie to you there.
Yeah.
His approach may not be great. Just given his track record.
Yeah.
His approach might not be stellar. But at the same time, you have to see the good intention behind it. But then Jack Perry goes, oh, it's real glass, deal with it. And Punk goes, dude, what the fuck? Why? Why do that? Which I still don't understand. Why do that?
Because he's a petty little bitch.
Other than just to be a little prick about it.
Instead of Jack Perry, it's Jack Petty.
And so, CM Punk gets him in a headlock.
He puts him in the Anaconda Vice and taps him out for real.
Which literally meant nothing, but then Jack Perry's told to leave. Tony Khan squeals in his highest voice like you can't do that. I do not believe for a single second CM Punk lunged at Tony Khan.
I do believe that this was the first instance of real violence that Tony Khan has ever witnessed in his life, and he was behind a table screeching for help.
Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me if it was.
And probably peed his little pantaloons at the same time.
No matter what happened, even though Punk joked with Miro, hey, you want to get into a fight about it? They're yeah. So it's real glass, big whoop, want to fight about it? But in any case, it's just so then CM Punk gets fired.
Yeah.
Quote unquote, with cause. And that, I had already kind of phoned it in after the Crown of Thorns incident. That was when but this, CM Punk getting fired for wanting somebody not to kill themselves with real glass. That's the grounds for termination that we've got in AEW. Good intentions. How can you endorse somebody who is that afraid to just deal with the problems he has on his table because he wants his Montreal Screwjob moment?
Them firing.
He thinks that this is his Montreal Screwjob moment.
Them firing.
Point.
At simultaneously, like, for me personally, this was both something that kind of, like, I felt was going to happen eventually, and it should have been solved, like, the year earlier with the whole Adam Page controversy, but the fact that you let it fester, it was only a matter of time before something had to be done, and the damage was already done, and it wasn't getting fixed. It was only getting worse by the day. But at the same time, this was just the ultimate indictment of AEW is never going to be a success. And it's because of Tony Khan.
Because of Tony
This
Khan.
whole situation is Tony Khan's fault. Yeah, you can blame CM Punk here, you can blame the Elite here, you can blame Jack Perry here, you can fucking blame Colt Cabana or whoever. You can.
They do all share a piece of that blame.
You can blame Larry the dog for all you want to, for being involved and barking, and Kenny Omega like, oh, save the dog. But Tony Khan is the boss. Tony Khan, again, like I said earlier, he was the scared little kid hoping his parents would stop fighting. That can't be your boss. Someone like that should not be the figurehead of the company. The fact,
well, and that unlimited capital allows it.
as long,
It's kind of getting back to my point about him ruining this for the rest of us.
he
I have to imagine all three of us, whether we have been in front of a real fight or not, which I have.
as well.
But
I have to.
Even if you haven't, I have to imagine all three of us would have handled this situation better by doing something.
I was about to say, it's not even a matter of handling it better. It's not even a matter of handling it better. It's a matter of handling it at all.
Period, yes. And you said, Josh, again just a second ago, that Tony Khan is the boss. No, that's the problem. Tony Khan is not a boss.
Mm-hmm. He is always going to be, and will forever be, the reason why AEW will never succeed. So long as Tony Khan is the boss, AEW is going to stagnate and limp on until someone finally puts a slug in the back of its head.
Well,
and another thing too that now is concerning is what's going to happen to these guys and girls who are going to be with AEW and who are going to continue wrestling for them. We've already said it, the number of injuries that have been on this company's rocket. Like, Adam Cole has been injured, Matt Hardy's been injured, Jeff Hardy's been injured.
Everyone's been injured.
Bryan Danielson's been injured. Kenny Omega.
Both her ACLs.
I mean, what's going to happen with Saraya, a.k.a. Paige? When is her neck going to break? When is Adam Copeland's neck going to break? Sting is finally retiring, but hopefully he doesn't get in a wheelchair before that. Rick Allen just did a jump off of a ramp while having a broken arm and landed on the broken arm.
Yeah, he was like, I have a great idea. Hey, Christian, give me a Falcon arrow off the apron on top of the edge of the steel steps. That will look great.
Well, that's another point we really do have to present here, and I'm glad you brought it up, Skyler, and it's the point that Tony Khan now is hiring a lot of risky wrestlers. And that's another thing. We've kind of had an ongoing joke of who's going to die in the ring first. And it's been a foot race between Saraya showing up and Edge showing up and Darby Allin just doing ridiculous shit. And any number
Bryan Danielson's problems. Ric
Flair showed up.
I was about to say, add Ric Flair to the mix, and that just concerns me to no end.
He bans Hulk Hogan permanently, but he signs Ric Flair.
He
makes him a gift to Sting.
He calls out and talks about Vince McMahon being a pervert, and then signs Ric Flair.
But this is another thing. Tony, he doesn't have any grasp of this.
Nope.
He doesn't have the grasp of the implications behind the people because he views all of these people, and we've mentioned this many times before, as his action figures.
Mm-hmm.
No. It's not action figures. There's a word that's been used that will continue to be used. The fact that it's in every storyline is such a big thing. He views these people as his friends.
Yes, his action figure friends.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the biggest problem right now with AEW, is that every storyline and everything they're involved in is about friendship.
God, it's so corny when you say that, but it's true.
Everything with the Elite has been about friendship. Everything has always been, why do you like that guy over me? The whole Max Caster thing with him saying, why won't you be friends with us, Maxwell?
We're both Maxes.
After Maxwell Jacob Freeman was in a storyline with Adam Cole about being friends.
Yep.
Well, and let's mention this too as well. When it comes to booking, the amount of momentum they get that they've just killed. Mm-hmm. What happened to Wardlow?
That's still How could you screw up? He was so hot.
They had a shoe-in, marketable Hulk Hogan level star in Wardlow.
It was a layup.
MJF. Irrelevant.
It was not even a layup. It was if like a 9 foot tall muscular dude was playing basketball and just.
It was like if Yao Ming was holding you up to the basket.
Yes. And you still brick.
Yeah, and that was the thing, and they didn't do it, and now they're trying to make something out of it, but at the end of this, I mean, they put him into these just insufferable feuds, and that's the thing. Tony Khan's booking gets people under. It doesn't get people over. He is Vince Russo 2.0, but I still think Vince Russo has more self-respect than Tony Khan. I can't believe I'm saying that.
I know. I was about to say, those are just words that shouldn't be said.
Especially because Vince Russo is to this day begging for a job in any sort of wrestling capacity, even though he hates the wrestling business and everybody else.
I hate the wrestling business, bro. Wrestling, bro. Yeah. You cannot be a good person and be in the wrestling business, bro. Well, what the fuck does that say about you, Vince?
But I will say this, though. To the defense of Vince Russo, I don't think... First of all, I don't think Vince Russo has ever done anything in the wrestling business that he has intentionally tried to do maliciously. I think he's just incompetent in that respect.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think it was because he doesn't like wrestling. I think it's just because he had a different view of wrestling. But in defense of Vince Russo, yes, he set the precedent for this, but a lot of what Tony Khan has done in these past 4 years has been far more damaging than anything Vince Russo ever produced.
Like,
Vince Russo's biggest failing is, I think, trying to inject too much reality into your wrestling, where Tony Khan wants you to not give a shit because you know it's fake, so we're just gonna make it look fake. Vince Russo never did anything to make it look deliberately fake. He just wanted to do stuff that was ridiculous because it was the soap opera style of television presentation.
But here's the thing that kind of I want to get across and kind of finish this on a note is, where do you all see AEW going? Where is as you said before, Sean, they will hit rock bottom, but where is rock bottom? Because I don't know if there is.
Someone's going to die in their ring.
Yeah, that'll do it.
I feel like that day, I feel like it's going to happen. It's going to happen. It's inevitable.
And sadly, the front runner, I think, right now is Rick.
Yep.
Wait, who?
I truly believe right now. I mean, Sting is up there. Edge, I'm actually thinking that Edge is probably smart enough to know who to wrestle and who not to. I'm going to give Edge the benefit of the doubt there. Although it did disappoint me that Edge joined AEW to this day. It's just because, especially because right now, I think Punk leaving was the climax, and all we're seeing now is falling action with AEW. Their ratings are 660 at the end of this show.
The whole Punk fiasco just really, it's honestly making AEW as a brand kind of toxic, and like, who would ever want to work there? And that's kind of the vibe it's giving off, except for, you know, the poor saps that still think it's good.
Which are fewer than they've ever been.
Like, it's getting to the point where even some of those people are starting to wake up to reality.
Yeah, they're running everybody off, and Tony Khan doesn't understand that he's the problem. Just like Todd Bowles, he doesn't understand that he's the problem. Tony Khan needs to listen to... Session version 2, by the way, subscribe to that on YouTube so you understand the reference that I just made.
I can't believe I'm about to make this reference. I can't believe that I'm about to make this reference, but Tony Khan really needs to start listening to Taylor Swift, because it's me. I'm the problem. It's me. Okay?
Yeah. It's true. And Tony Khan doesn't have Travis Kelce to fuck him to death.
Yeah, he doesn't have that big sexy man riding him saying, "Who's the chief? Who's the chief?"
End the show. Cut it.
But in conclusion, as you were saying, Skyler, I see either AEW is going to experience a death in the ring, or the viewership's going to keep declining until they turn into Impact 2.0, where it just kind of lingers and it's there and no one's watching it, and it's kind of in the peripheral.
Well, I will say this, and this will be my final point, and we'll close out this final cast for who the hell knows where it's going to air. But I truly believe that the firing of CM Punk, whether it was with cause or without, has lost the faith of the network.
Mm-hmm.
And I would not be surprised that come a year from now, we are talking about AEW airing on Showtime Plus or Hulu Plus or whatever streaming service du jour you have, because I truly do not believe they're going to have a TV deal come a year from now.
Dude, Sean, I remember there was one year a couple years ago where I went to the beach and we watched a bunch of different TV, and we went to the TV Guide channel, and in the corner of the TV Guide channel was Impact Wrestling.
Impact.
Yep.
Yeah, they were on Pop Channel. That was what it was called.
Yeah, Pop TV.
Back when I was still trying with Impact and realized the cause was lost.
Yeah. That I see that in AEW's future.
Me too.
Being the upper 1/4 left corner of the screen, where the point of the channel, the point of that channel is literally what else is on.
Yeah, coming soon to the Bravo Network.
Oh God.
Dynamite. Yeah, but this is where we're at though. I think that AEW right now is in a downward spiral, and Tony is not doing well with that.
Nope.
He's not handling it very well. I mean, even this this soccer program in London, they just staged a 1,000+ person demonstration against being priced out of the programs that Tony Khan owns in Man City or Man U. I forget which one he owns.
He owns Fulham Football Club in London, and they're so pissed at him that they're doing protests because they want Tony Khan removed.
I wonder why.
They've been having programs with the Jaguar Stadium as well, even though the Jaguar, except for getting completely demolished by the 49ers today at the time of recording.
Dude, Skyler, how happy did that make you?
It brought warmth to my heart, my cold heart.
I hope to God I can kill that next week, but let's save that for another time.
But I'll close off on this. If the day comes that someone dies in the ring, or AEW itself moves to Pop TV or dies, honestly, I want to do another podcast like this where we basically just dance on that company's grave.
I won't be upset about it. I really won't.
I'll be happy about it because they've asked for it and they will deserve it.
The problem is, I do still like MJF, even though they ruined it. I like a lot of the people there, even
Me
though
too.
they ruined a lot of those people's careers by just setting foot in that place.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I pity them because none of them knew that Tony Khan was going to be this bad.
I pity some of them.
I mean, but nobody knew it.
You pity the fool?
I pity the fool that works for the AEW.
It's never good. There's fewer places to work, especially when Billy Corgan is being a complete fucking dumbass. It cost them their spot.
Oh,
The
man.
CW network that now NXT has control of.
Dude, can we talk about that real quick? That made me so happy. I belly laughed when I saw that. So for those of you that don't know, Billy Corgan and the NWA finally got a gig on the CW network. And before, like the same week, they had a pay-per-view where they had a comedy bit backstage where people were snorting cocaine. And then
It was Father James Mitchell from Impact fame, who was in a segment with a bunch of strippers and a bunch of his wrestlers, and they were drinking and doing cocaine.
And that pissed off CW execs, and now they're only going to be allowed to do their shows on the CW app.
Meanwhile, and this was happening at the same time, they were able to negotiate a deal with WWE to have NXT on the CW, which is going to be a major thing.
Yeah. So, Shawn Michaels.
The network specifically is for younger people who really are into like entertainment shows. WWE has the chance to get brand new people that's never seen their products before.
Yeah. What a concept. What a novel concept. Let's get more people to watch our show instead of less. And also, Shawn Michaels, please don't have a backstage segment of you snorting cocaine or doing drugs. Do a backstage segment of you reading the Bible or something.
I mean, to be honest, if anyone would be snorting cocaine in a backstage segment to promote their show, it'd be Tony Khan.
Honestly, yeah, I'm surprised they haven't done that yet. Tony, do it. Tony, do it. No balls. Do it.
Well, and just to put the final period on the end of the sentence, there is no one more in mark for Tony Khan than Tony Khan.
Exactly.
Because think about how often his special announcements have appeared since that fight at All Out.
Dude, he had
Tony Khan took that as an opportunity to be Mr. McMahon. The difference is Tony fucking sucks.
Yes.
And Vince understood the wrestling business enough to know how to be a complete asshole.
Yes.
Tony Khan has no concept of that and thinks that he's going to be everybody's friend and he's going to end up the babyface. And that is not the way that this is going down. And he's not smart enough to learn how to turn heel enough to make it interesting.
Vince knows how to be an asshole. Tony is good at being a dumb ass, and he has the last person to figure out that he's fucking stupid will be Tony Khan.
And it's a goddamn shame because, like, if Tony Khan figured out a way to get over the way that Bischoff did, they might have something.
And another thing, another period at the end of the sentence. Even if Tony Khan gets removed from power and there's a hostile takeover or whatever, and AEW all of a sudden cures all their ailments, they will forever have the stigma of ruining Punk's return to wrestling.
Until WWE brings him back and makes it right again, because Triple H is always willing to mention it.
But even if
Punk... We'll have to be really Superman, but we'll see what happens.
Even if Punk returns to WWE, it won't be the same as the first dance. It won't have the same effect. And you'll never recapture that again.
But they could, though. That's the thing, is that they have the potential to. Because they could do the one thing that AEW failed to do. They could have CM Punk in marketable matches against people and have it be good and sustained.
Well, and that's kind of the piece that puts this all together, is that in the time that AEW has been combusting, WWE has been rebuilding.
Exactly.
And that has changed everything about the way that people perceive WWE now.
WWE's hot right now.
to the point they could merge with UFC and make a brand new stock, even though Vince took over the company with a hostile takeover. But let's not get into the details of that situation. But the thing that's the most important is that WWE has regained the faith of the viewers.
Exactly, and that's the most important thing.
Lost.
Mm-hmm.
So do I believe that WWE will handle CM Punk adequately, even though their format is very monotonous as it is? And that's something you can't really avoid. That's something that where you're Teflon, you don't change from that. Fine, I get that. But do I trust WWE to handle CM Punk better now than I do AEW? Hell yes.
Me too. If it I have my doubts that it'll happen, but if it does, honestly, nothing will make me happier than WWE re-signing Punk and everything goes well, and that's the kill shot that ends AEW. That would be so poetic.
But we'll see what happens in the meantime. With that, thank you for being here on this very special podcast. And remember to like, share, and subscribe to the Court Martial Podcast and TAW Gaming. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you very much, and like Skyler said, we will see you guys next time. And if you like AEW, why?